Discover your inner goddess and live up to your highest value and most abundant potential. Welcome to Grateful Goddesses, a podcast that empowers you to unleash your inner goddess and take the leap of faith to live your best life. Your guide, Karen Pulver, joins her fellow goddesses in soulful conversations about gratitude, personal growth, authentic living, and a bevy of topics affecting women today. Let's start the show with your host, Karen Pulver.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us today on Grateful Goddesses. I'd like to read you a passage. What if I told you that by adding a few really simple, delicious new foods to your current lifestyle, you could pump up your libido to levels unseen since the days of Greek Dionysian orgies? You better go stitch yourself a new pair of fig leaf underwear, because I'm going to turn you into a superfood sex god or goddess before you know it. Well, I wanted to be that sex goddess, so I made myself a watermelon, pomegranate, lime, mint salad for my lunch, because according to our guest today, Jason Wrobel, this is going to increase my libido. And I can't wait to eat it and then have a nice afternoon delight. No, seriously though, it is true that if you do eat plant-based, that it can have a lot of amazing positive effects for your lifestyle. In fact, our guest, Jason Wrobel, I met him, ironically, at a dental conference of all places. He was giving a talk of how to live to 100. And I was just so happy that someone was validating the way that I had already been eating and how great it made me feel. And there were a lot of questions I had that he answered, and he was just so incredible that I went up to him afterwards and I talked to him about the way that we're eating, but I also loved his personality. And I just felt this connection that he is going to help me. I can't explain what it was, but it was like this intuition. I have to reach out to him. And sure enough, he coached me to do this podcast. He lifted me up. He is compassionate. He supported me. I might even get emotional because I had a moment of really doubting myself that I could do this. And I called him one night and he talked with me about, yes, you can, and you can do this. So he's really encouraging. So I'd like to read to you a little bit about Jason. Jason Wrobel is a best-selling author of the Hay House cookbook and lifestyle guide, Eaternity. As the first ever plant-based chef with a primetime television series, his groundbreaking show, How to Live to 100 on Cooking Channel and Food Network Canada, taught millions of people how to prepare delicious, organic, healthy meals at home. Described as the love child of Jim Carrey and Alton Brown, he infuses his live events, videos, and teachings with a relentless drive to grow and a lighthearted, joyful approach to health and wellness. So welcome, Jason, to Grateful Goddesses.
It's so good to be here, Karen. It's wonderful to see the genesis of this wonderful podcast and your shared vision come to life and so quickly too. I mean, it feels like the other day we were talking about you resurrecting this vision, expanding this vision, bringing your message and your goddesses to the world. And here we are. And I know it might not feel that way to you, but it feels to me like it happened so quickly. And now we're sitting, virtually across the mic from each other. And I couldn't be more excited to share this vision with you and also be a guest today. Like my heart feels so full.
Oh, I do too. I decided to wear like old school, my Grateful Goddess shirt that I made these like over 11 years ago. And I just wanted to share it with you because you really did understand my vision and you were just so helpful along the way. I'm nervous. I was telling you this before because you're like my teacher and I'm like being graded. So if I stumble over my words, but hopefully I'll get an A+ today from you. So you have so many roles, Jason, and I would love to talk with you about that. Yes, you're a coach and you eat plant-based. Can you talk with us about all the many hats that you wear?
Boy, I think, this is an interesting topic because I feel like this year in particular, for so many reasons, has been such a roller coaster. It's been such a year of pulling back and questioning where my heart is. I've been on this track for the last 15 years of being, I guess, primarily known as a chef and a nutritionist. I got my TV show on Cooking Channel and of the books that I've published. And I guess most people that know my work would associate me with being a plant-based chef and a nutrition educator. But I've had so many passions ever since I was a little boy. I think my mom and my family figured out pretty quickly that I couldn't be held to one track, that I was always very interested in multiple things at one time. And so, I've been singing in 12 different bands over the last 15 years. Actually, you're in Chicago. When I lived in Chicago for 3.5 years, I sung in a band called A Modern Joy there. And we gigged all around Chicago. We played the Metro, we played the Abbey, we played a lot of the venues in Chicago. And so I have a lot of love for Chicago. I went to Columbia College there and got a degree in marketing and theater. So I've been in marketing, I've been in acting, I've been known as a chef. Also, you mentioned a coach. I think whatever my personality type is, I've looked at Enneagram, I've looked at so many different kind of personality types. And I think one thread through I've noticed is that I'm interested in a lot of different aspects of life. And it's been difficult for me to just pick one thing and stick with it for my whole life. And I know this is a bit tangential probably, but I always compared myself to other people and thought, how could someone, just be a guitar player their whole life or be a doctor their whole life? And I kind of envied those people of why can't I just pick one thing and that's my thing and that's my track for the next, 60 years of my life. And I had to surrender to the fact that I'm not wired that way. And I'm curious about life and I want to experiment with things and I want to gain proficiency with different things. So I think that's the long answer is I just have a zest and a taste to experience as many aspects of life as possible and therefore have a lot of different passions.
You are our third male goddess. So I'm curious, we always talk about just the characteristics of a goddess. It sounds like you have that. You have curiosity, passion, joy, happiness. You also are very involved in helping organizations. I know that you reached out to people about, there was I believe it was a cat that was left not too long ago, or maybe a month or two ago. And what was that organization again called?
Yeah, there's an animal rescue organization
Right.
here in Los Angeles where I live now called Little Love Rescue.
Right.
And they, they're pretty small. They're not on the level of like an ASPCA or Humane Society or anything like that. But a friend of mine has been running it for many, many years. And, she was in need of some extra support, especially during this time of quarantine and COVID. And for me, I've always had such a deep connection to animals, even as a little kid. I was the little kid running around the neighborhood, trying to rescue all the animals. And of course, later on going plant-based and vegan, I've just always had a deep, passionate connection to supporting animals. So I've been involved with them. And then I've also been really involved with the feeding of the homeless here in Los Angeles, during this economic kind of devastation we've been in here during COVID, the number of homeless people in Los Angeles has increased exponentially. So I've been involved with an organization here called the Martha Project, which is also a nonprofit that gets donations of food, and we make fully organic plant-based meals, really good stuff, Thai food, burritos, Italian food. And a few times a month, we will get together and package about 200 meals and then go and deliver them to the homeless around the city of Los Angeles. And as an aside, this is very near and dear to my heart because my father actually, near the end of his life, probably the last 7 years of his life, was actually homeless. My dad was on the streets. That's a whole nother story we can or cannot get into. But for me, it's just an opportunity to give back because that literally touches my life, having experienced one of my parents being homeless.
So you've taken all the lessons that you've learned and all the experiences that you've had in your life, and you're just doing what you love to do. I think there's nothing wrong at all with trying out so many different things. And not, I think my generation is like, pick one thing, but you are younger than me. And I think it's totally, fine to do all that, to maybe find, certain things, certain paths that you want to explore more. Our featured goddesses are going to join us now.
Yay.
Hi, girls. We're here with Jason. Camille would like to start.
Well, hello.
Hi,
Thank you so
Camille.
much for joining us. So you mentioned all your different passions and having to go through figuring out that you're not meant just for one. So I'm curious, because that was my original question, was how did you choose your first passion, whether it's vegan, chef, or coach, and why? But you kind of mentioned all these different paths that you kind of went through. So I'm curious, as of now, what has been your main focus moving forward? What do you think now you're going to concentrate more on?
Yeah, it's a great question. A lot of people don't know I also have this side of being an actor for many years. So that was actually my OG passion. So when I graduated Columbia in 2000, year 2000, I mentioned I had a marketing and a theater degree. I did a lot of improv there. I did a lot of theater. So kind of a side hustle. The last 4 years, I've actually been in 5 different commercials. So the acting thing has always been in the background. It's been there kind of ever present for the last 20 years in different versions. So, it's interesting you asked this. I always have felt, no matter what I'm doing, that if I can really be with people, whether that's on a stage, unfortunately right now that's not really an option at the time of this recording, a virtual stage. Exactly. I love connecting with people. I think that's been the thread through with everything that I've done, whether that's been the acting, or I mentioned, the music and being in 12 different bands, or primarily now doing the coaching and the vegan chefing. I want to use art and creativity and my personality to not just connect deeply with people, learn about who they are, what makes them tick, but more so how I can be of support. There's just always been something in me that if I can give love, if I can give wisdom, if I can really foster a deep connection with people for the hope of bettering their life, I think that's the common thread through for everything, and I think art right now, there's been this interesting debate online with a lot of my friends that are musicians and actors that are really struggling right now, especially they're used to being on tour, they're used to being on set. And the importance of artistic expression and creativity to heal not only our hearts and our souls, but humanity. And this debate about what's essential, and certainly to me, there's no debate that obviously healthcare workers and a lot of the positions that we've deemed essential absolutely are. But I want to go on record, and I think that artists are extremely essential for the collective healing of our psyche and our hearts, especially now when there's so much anxiety, stress, depression, uncertainty. So I guess the long answer to your question, Camille, is I just think artistry and connection are the foundations of what I want to do in the world, and however that expresses themselves. I guess I'm just kind of surrendering to whatever wants to come through. And that's been really hard because I have a tendency to want to control things and know this is my title and this is what I'm doing. But oh boy, this year has been a teacher in you don't know what's happening. You don't really have any certainty. And dude, stop trying to control everything. So legit moving forward, I'm just trying to surrender and obey the messages I'm getting, whether you want to call it God, universe, spirit, whatever title people are comfortable with. I'm just trying to listen better and see how I can be of service.
You bring up a great point about art being essential, because I think all of us would agree that we were all binge watching or listening to more music. We were all totally in debt to art during the beginning of the pandemic. So you're completely 100% right on. And speaking of that whole coaching and chefing, and if you had talked to us yesterday, I was completely anti-plant-based, but a certain person made me watch a movie. And so I'm curious if you can share what tips you can give as far as when you became vegan and plant-based, like how and why did you do that? And maybe I can learn for myself how to become more plant-based and vegan.
Yeah. And it's funny that you made that expression, because there's no shame in the game. And what I mean when I say that is, I think for a lot of people that I've coached and talked to, whether they've been clients or friends and family that are curious why I eat and live the way that I do, it doesn't have to be a cold turkey. I say this, funny because vegans don't eat turkey, but it doesn't have to be an all or nothing approach. And my girlfriend actually has been eating more plant-based. And I told her when we started dating, she's like, oh, I feel like it's got to be all or nothing. I feel like I've got to be, both feet in the pool, all the way in the pool, or nothing at all. I said, it doesn't, nothing in life has to be that extreme. And there are instead of just black and white, there are areas of gray in between. There are many gradations and gradients. And for me, when I started, it was my desire to kind of re-landscape my family's health history. It was the mid-90s, and I was 18 years old, and my grandfather was dying of cancer. It was his second bout with cancer. And I remember that really affected me. Like, it was my first significant death in my life at 18. So there was that component of like trying to emotionally, I guess, internalize or process my grandfather's death, who I was very close to. But I started to zoom out a little bit, and I looked at my family's health history, right? There was kind of this attitude in general of like, well, that's just what happens. You know, you get older, you get a disease, you die. And I thought, there's something about this that doesn't sit with me. You know, like, what do you mean that just happens? Like, you get old, you get a disease, you die. I thought, that's weird. Like, I don't understand why that's an acceptable expectation of how we end our lives. And so the internet had just come out. This was like I said, 1995. I'm sitting with my dial up, you know, ding, 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 waiting 15 minutes for the pages to load on AOL and, you know, Netscape Navigator, all those old school things. And I just started to voraciously research food. I wanted to know more. I had no nutritional upbringing. I think for most of us, right? We don't really have necessarily a family we grew up in where we're taught how to eat right. We don't learn about, you know, what foods have vitamin C in them. Why is vitamin C important? What has B vitamins? What actually is protein? Like, I certainly did not have that kind of upbringing where that was explained to me. So for the first time ever in my late teens, early 20s, I just started to research nutrition and food and what was in our food supply. And I did it gradually over the course of about 3.5 years. I went from, you know, I grew up in Detroit, so it was like Coney dogs and deep dish pizza, and I was a hardcore junk fooditarian. I mean, I worked at Wendy's. I would get a triple at Wendy's. That wasn't even on the menu. You had to go off menu for a triple at Wendy's. Like, I had to unhinge my jaw like an anaconda just to fit that burger in my mouth. That's why I was rolling, okay? But 3.5 years later, I just started to take one thing out at a time very gradually, you know, like taking out beef, taking out veal, experimenting with taking out chicken. But I got to say that the more that I removed those animal foods from my diet gradually over 3.5 years and replaced them with other sources of protein, other nutrient dense foods, I started losing weight. My skin was clearing up, and I felt so much better. And 3.5 years after I started that journey, I was in my mom's kitchen in Detroit, and I said, "Mom, I got to tell you something." And she's like, "Okay." And I think she thought that I was going to come out to her, like, "Oh, is he going to tell me he's gay?" Like, there was that energy of like, "I'm not gay, Mom." But she's like, "Oh, I wouldn't mind if you were or you weren't." Like, I love my mom so much; she's amazing. But I said, "But it's kind of similar." I said, "I think I'm vegan now." It was weird for me to even say it because that was not my intention. I wasn't trying to be vegan. That wasn't the goal, right? But it was just that I started taking out animal products one by one and replacing them with more nutrient-dense plant foods. And I was like, this is the best I ever felt in my life. And now I've been doing it 22 years and I never look back. I still feel great.
We have to ask you, because we were discussing this yesterday.
Yeah.
Vegan, plant-based. What is the difference?
Okay, dig. So vegan, as far as I understand it, again, I'm not looking up Webster's dictionary, and there might be people that take me to task, but my understanding is that veganism as a lifestyle is beyond just diet and what you eat, in the sense that vegans will not buy leather products, they won't buy wool, they won't buy silk. They look at whatever industries are utilizing animals for commodities, and they eschew that. They choose not to participate in that. Whereas plant-based, from what I understand, is strictly looking at nutrition and diet and what we eat. So veganism is a broader, all-encompassing sort of ethical philosophy, a guiding ethical principle of we're not going to use animals in clothing, food, transportation, things like that, which also is technically impossible because to remove all animal products from our life, just, you know, they use animal fat in the galvanization of tires, right? So if you have a car, even if your car doesn't have leather in it, they're still using animal products to create the tires and some of the components and things like that. But the point is to try and eliminate as much animal usage in your life. Whereas plant-based is like, okay, I'm just not going to eat things that come from animals. That's the difference.
And what do you categorize yourself in as?
I kind of use them interchangeably because they're both accurate. You know what I mean? In the sense that I have focused my diet since 1998 on plant-based, right? Where I've utilized all my, you know, meals and diet from plants. But I also, you know, I choose not to buy leather shoes. There's some great companies out there that have some amazing boots, beautiful shoes that don't use leather. So it's actually a lot easier now to find even like high fashion stuff, because I like my shoes, I like I like nice things, you know. So if you were to look at my closet, you'd be like, oh, he doesn't have like parkas and ponchos and like hippie stuff. Like I've got I like nice things, you know. So for me, I try and go that extra mile to be like I said, as vegan as possible. It's not an absolutist thing. Whereas, you know, I like to drive a nice car. I have a nice motorcycle. I like nice things, but I try and be as mindful of extending compassion in my choices, because I realize that, and this is, I think, really relevant when we're recording this, right? Because one of my biggest things ever is, you know, we have this thing where we vote every few years, whether that's the presidential election or our local candidates, right? And I'm very passionate about politics and you know, my beliefs and all that, but every single day we have a chance to vote with our dollars, right? Whether the food you buy, the car you buy, the products that you know, the beauty care that you buy every day, every single time you go online, you go to Amazon, or, you know, you go out to the market, you have an opportunity to vote with your dollars, right? So it's, to me, knowing that my financial abundance has the ability to grow certain companies or take money away from them. So I always look at whatever I spend my money on, it's always a vote. That's exactly how I look at leveraging my dollars in this world.
I told you guys that you learned so much from him, right? Like, I didn't even think of it that way. Rachel, you're up.
Oh my gosh, I love your story. I love your background. I love where you are in life right now, because I feel that I'm exactly in the same place as you. And I am like in this period of quiet and listening and accepting that, like, the privilege that I don't have to make a decision right now where I'm going to put my energy, but I am really evaluating my life. Okay, so my question is, I have 3 teenage boys that I'm feeding, and they're hungry. And truth be told, we have, I mean, like, we always have a salad, and I always have a vegetable at every meal. Like, I mean, I'm not like crazy. And I even grew up with a mom who shopped at, like, before there was Whole Foods and those little local stores. And my mom grew everything and made everything from scratch. So I feel like I come from a decent groundwork, but we absolutely eat meat. And I'm trying to, like, what are, like, simple ways to incorporate more of a plant-based diet, and things that, like, what are the best things to eliminate, or like really easy ways to add things that it's like less focused, even, you know. Or I know, like, there's like the one meal a week or one day a week where you do plant-based, but I'm just curious what your suggestions are.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, first of all, for me, you know, I want to go on record and say, like, I don't demonize any food, right? So I'm not saying like meat is evil or meat is the enemy. I've never taken that tack in my life. For me, though, I do think that most people could benefit from eating more fruits, vegetables, legumes, you know, nutrient dense plant foods. But I'm never about demonizing meat or demonizing animal products. I think, you know, the first thing that I've seen is, you know, if you get organic, free range, leaner meats, right, that's generally a healthier option. Obviously, hormone free, antibiotic free, locally grown, you know, locally raised. That was a step that I took many, many years ago, and many friends that I know who are omnivores and choose that lifestyle, they choose that because that's just healthier across the board. So I just want to say that, first of all. But I think in terms of, say, if you wanted to have nutrient dense, protein rich meals, it's really about substitution. And there's a lot of amazing brands out there. Some of them are more processed than others, right? And so it depends on where you are on the scale of wanting processed foods. You know, I'm a big fan of using a product called tempeh, which is a fermented, organic, non-GMO soybean cake. You know, you can make a great chicken salad out of that. It tastes amazing. Tuna salad, you can grill it up almost like mini steaks. There's tofu, you know, and for people that are down with it, you know, I'm a big fan of Beyond Meat. Some people are like, oh, it's processed and, you know, it's not a whole food, but I think Beyond Meat is a great product. I think what they're doing in terms of creating protein rich, soy free, you know, non-GMO, really great you know, non-animal products. Like I said, my girlfriend's eating more plant-based now. We'll cook up some Beyond Meat meatballs. We'll do burgers. I'll do stews with her, chilies, put some of their ground beef in it. So there's a lot of substitutes out there that, again, are as nutrient dense or as protein rich as the animal based versions. So gradual substitution, or like you said, just doing 1 or 2 meals a week where you're adding those substitutes in, I think that's a good thing. Beans and legumes, right? You look at chickpeas, you look at black beans, you look at navy beans, any of those kind of things are super nutrient dense and super rich in protein. And having been a teenage boy once who was an athlete and would also eat my mom out of house and home, I remember that period. It was just like, I couldn't get enough food. It's really about not just nutrient density, but caloric density, right? Because if they're really moving their bodies, and their bodies are growing at an exponential rate when they're teenage boys, you want to make sure that you're getting really calorie dense foods. So if I think about calorie dense foods, I think about nut butters, I think about avocado, I think about olives, I think about fattier, more calorie dense foods, where they really give you that level of satiation, but they're also really healthy for you too. Healthy fats are a win. I'm a huge fan of healthy fats.
That's so interesting about Beyond Meat, because not to be devil's advocate, but I did see something where it said that Beyond Meat, a burger, has the same fat content as a Big Mac. Mm-hmm. So how do you feel about the fat content, though? I guess you said it's a healthy fat, right?
Yeah. So I think there needs to be, well, first of all, yes, being calorically dense, any kind of fat is going to take more energy and effort for you to burn it. Like, I want to say that in terms of, we talk about burning calories, because fats are more dense in calories. They're going to take more energy and effort if you're in the gym or you're doing a run to burn those calories. Right. But in terms of nutrient value or healthfulness, if we look at the type of fats that are out there, we have, saturated fats, we have monounsaturated fats. And if you look at saturated fats, many of those are the ones we talk about in McDonald's fast food. We talk about trans fatty acids, which are the partially hydrogenated oils. Those fats are not as equal to the fat that you would get from an avocado, the fat that you would get from soy, the fat that you would get from an olive, the fat that you would get from sesame seeds. So if we're talking about fat and we're talking about fat content, we need to really be mindful of the type of fat we're consuming, because it does make a difference. If you're eating, say, a plant-based fat, like a monounsaturated fat, your body isn't going to process it the same way as it would. It's not going to have the same level of inflammatory effect on the body as something like a saturated fat or a partially hydrogenated fat would have. And those are the things, Karen, you see in fast foods, processed foods.
Right.
So I just know that from the research I've seen. Dr. Joel Kahn is a great resource for this. He's actually a Detroit-based vegan cardiologist. He's a world-leading cardiologist, and he has a lot of information on the difference of how plant fats affect the heart and affect the blood versus hydrogenated or animal fats do. So just a hat tip to Dr. Joel Kahn if you want to dig into his research.
No, that makes total sense. And now I see, I wish that article had said that, not when you just see same as a Big Mac, I was like, oh, I don't want to have that. But that totally makes sense. Dina.
Hi, Jason.
Hey, Dina.
I'm also a fellow Detroiter, and
nice.
And yes. Still love my Greek salads.
Awesome.
So one of my daughters recently decided to give up red meat for the environment. So I have been challenged to create meals for everybody to enjoy outside of the red meat. And what I found, I'm a big Googler of, quick, easy one pan meals and such. I ran into the feeling of, I felt like they were all side dishes, right? All these plant-based side dishes. So I was wanting to know from you, how do you make them a meal? How do you just do lots of side dishes, or I got stuck?
Yeah, that's a great question. It is kind of like a prototypical thing where you see at holidays, like Thanksgiving in particular. It's like, oh, okay, green beans, mashed potatoes, things like that are all vegan, but how do you make a vegan turkey, right? It's like, well, what do we do with that? So actually, this is interesting. I go back to my mom, who most of my family is still in Detroit. And as a side note, my mom is vegan now. My aunt is vegan, my 2 cousins, which is crazy to I get questions all the time of like, okay, well, you're in LA. It's easy to be vegan in LA, but what about Detroit? And then I lay on them that like my mom and 5 of my family members are vegan. They're like, how the hell do they do it in Detroit? But what we figured out over the years, kind of doing this together as a family, which I realize is very uncommon. Like for me to say that me and a lot of my family members are vegan, I'm definitely the exception, not the norm in that way. But what we've kind of figured out is how to use things like I mentioned, tempeh, which is a high protein, a non-GMO organic soybean, and tofu. And you can actually put these in a food processor and combine them with rosemary and thyme and oregano and spices and salt and pepper. And we've actually figured out a way to oven bake these into what they look like, kind of turkey breasts. And we make a mushroom gravy, and we make the mashed potatoes, and we do all these things. So it could be that maybe I just need to email you some really good recipes, because having done this for 22 years, I have a trove of really like tested recipes. But to your point, Dean, I think the difficulty is that there's almost so many recipes out there now, not just vegan recipes, but if we look at the culinary industry in general, right? There you can Google literally millions of recipes. The trick is, how do you know what's good? This is the tough thing, is how do you, like, for anyone, regardless of how you eat out there, the listener or any of you goddesses, it's like you're out there, you're Googling recipes, and you're like, is this going to be good, or is this going to suck? Like, is this going to be the thing where I spent all this time, all this money, I'm making this recipe, and then I try it and I'm like, oh, damn, this is not good. It's tough, to your point, just kind of zooming out on the whole culinary world in general. But I think to make a main dish, for me, it's just learning different skills and learning how to leverage different plant-based products. Now, I'm going to go on record and say, like, when we call it like vegan turkey, I'm putting air quotes, like when we do vegan ham or vegan seafood, like legit, it's never going to taste exactly like the thing. I want to dispel that myth right away, right? It's like, you're never going to like bite into it and go, wow, this tastes exactly like turkey. But you can get some things that are really close in terms of texture, mouthfeel, flavor. You can get it really, really, really close. So I think it's just, it's learning how to increase your skills in the kitchen and experiment with new ingredients to try and get those main dishes down. But I think in terms of the main dish, you know, I always think of like something that's really hearty, something that's really rich in protein. So again, after this, I'm happy to just email, and anybody else who wants it too, some recipes from my cookbook, my best-selling cookbook that came out. I also have about 300 recipes on YouTube as well, where a lot of them are main dishes.
This
So
cookbook.
So I think my recipes are pretty damn good.
They are.
They're pretty damn good.
I've made a bunch of them, including my watermelon salad that I still need to dive into.
For your libido, which I want a text report on that later, Karen.
Okay.
I will take those recipes.
So as I mentioned earlier, I'm still eating plant-based, but I did kind of, I don't know, I hate to say this, but kind of fall off the wagon a little bit, because I went to a friend's and she had cheese, and I was like, oh, I just want some cheese, some real cheese. And I had a little piece of cheddar, just a little tiny bite. But then I'm like, oh, I think cheese is addicting. I did see somewhere how addicting it is. It was like crack cocaine. Like I was just like, not that I've done crack cocaine, but I was just like eating this cheese, and I brought real cheese back into my life. I remember like doing this emergency text to you, Jason, saying, please tell me some good vegan cheese, because that was like something I was craving. But I'm still experimenting. I did also, we had a guest on the show, Joelle Rabion. She is a nutritionist, and she was talking about positive blood type and how she's that, and I turned out to be that, and how animal protein is good to incorporate into your diet for that. And I remember texting you about that, and also B12. So I just started to get all these messages, and I started to think, I'm kind of craving these things. So I did add some chicken back into my life, some fish, and it didn't last very long. I don't know if I gave you a follow-up. I had some chicken a little bit, and then I was like, I don't like this texture anymore. I was so used to the tempeh, and there's a great deli here. I don't know if you guys have tried it, Rachel or Dina, called Sam and Gertie's. They have vegan pastrami sandwiches, and they're just so good. So I guess my question, it's kind of all over the place, but B12, O-type, adding meat back in, like, I'm just kind of on that teeter-totter right now in my life, and I'm not sure where to go.
Yeah.
I didn't really ask a question. I just kind of told a story, but what
Sure.
are your thoughts on that?
I think that it is really important to acknowledge that our individual makeup is different than anybody else's. Like it's interesting, right? Because on the one hand, if we look at humanity and we look at the amount of DNA and we look at, I mean, if we really want to go back to science and our human origins, these interesting research studies about, we can trace humanity back to a single African woman, right? Genetically. So if we look at the common humanity, and I think if I can wax poetic and philosophical for a second, it feels like we're in such a divisive, charged moment in human society right now for so many reasons. But to me, if I think about the fact that genetically we are so similar, like if we honor our combined, our similar origins, to me, that in my mind brings us closer together and we have a common humanity. But there's enough variations genetically. You mentioned blood type, you mentioned, where we come from, ancestral diets. I think we have to honor what I call bioindividuality, in the sense that if we get intuitive enough and we listen to our bodies, right? And one thing that I encourage people to do in my coaching is, 20 to 30 minutes after you eat a meal, or maybe even sooner, depending how sensitive your body is, if you really get quiet and pay attention to, like, do I feel good after I eat this meal? Is my digestion good? Do I have energy? Does my mind feel clear and focused? Or do I kind of feel like crap? Do I feel foggy? Do I feel heavy? Is my gut kind of gurgling and not digesting well? I think if we learn to slow down and pay attention to what our bodies are telling us after we eat food, we can develop an intuition of what makes us feel good and what doesn't. But I think so many of us are so busy rushing through life. There's so much anxiety and stress. And look, I get it. Some people are in this mode of like, we got to survive right now. And I've certainly been in that mode myself for different reasons too. But to slow down and pay attention to what our minds and bodies are telling us, I think is crucial in terms of developing an intuition around food. And as we develop that intuition around food, you mentioned, Karen, like, I just felt intuitively like I wanted to have cheese and I wanted to have chicken, I wanted to have fish. We have to be willing to experiment with our bodies and experiment with our food, experiment with our workouts, experiment with meditation, our spirituality, whatever aspects of life we're feeling called to explore. I think answering that calling, answering that signal is vital for our development as people. And that's going to be different for every single one of us for a variety of reasons, right? So I want to, no matter what I do, no matter how I eat and how I live, I always want to honor people's individuality, honor their journey, and honor the sense of curiosity and experimentation. Because, on a cellular level, every 7 years, we're regenerating ourselves, meaning that the bodies we're in right now on a cellular level are different cells than they were completely. You have a completely different body cellularly than you had 7 years ago. So there's a regeneration period that occurs biologically every 7 years. So my mind always goes to, well, if I'm a completely different mass of cells, because my body has regenerated itself in a 7-year cycle, then how could exactly how I eat, exactly how I work out, exactly how I live be the same as it was 7 years ago? So honoring the journey of transformation, honoring the journey of what we need right now as we age, as our hormones change, as our bodies change, can't possibly be, for me at 43, the same way I ate exactly when I was, 18 years old or when I was 20 years old. It has changed, even though it's still plant-based. How I eat, how I live, how I move my body, how I think about life is different than it was 20 years ago. And I guess my overall answer, Karen, I'll get into the B12 in a second, is just that I'm glad you're honoring your journey. And for all of you ladies, all of you goddesses, all the listeners, to honor that, the changes are normal. The evolution of who we are as people is normal. And we've got to honor that. And we've got to be willing to experiment and try things differently. In terms of, you bring up B12, I think there are certain nutrients that are more difficult to get if you're eating a fully plant-based diet. There are foods that have B12, like nutritional yeast, spirulina, chlorella, microalgae. D3 is also somewhat challenging if you're not getting a lot of sunlight. K2 is also a challenging supplement. But if you know what to eat, or if you just take a really, really high quality supplement, that's a really good way to get it. And people are like, veganism can't be healthy if you got to take supplements. I'm like, yo, I know meat eaters. I know omnivore. I know everybody I know takes supplements regardless of how they eat. So taking supplements isn't just like a vegan thing. Like everybody that I know in my life, regardless of their lifestyle, takes supplements. I just think for longevity's sake, I think taking supplements is a good idea.
Yeah, I started to get B12 shots actually, which really help. Yeah, they help with energy for sure. Thank you, Jason. So, Camille.
So, kind of piggybacking on all your different cravings that you were saying, like, I feel the same thing with as far as like cheese and certain comfort foods, and with holidays coming up as well, like you mentioned with the vegan turkey. Are there any traditional or comfort foods that you kind of tend towards? And I was thinking also for myself, like I can't eat soy because I have fibroid issues, and I'm sure I'm not the only woman out there that might. So with everything that you're mentioning, I'm like, oh yeah, can't eat that, can't eat that. So I'm wondering also on that aspect if you could bring in a little bit for that too.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about food, not just like food sensitivities, food allergies, or certain, I guess, preconditions that don't allow you to eat certain foods. That's tough in general. I mean, for me, one of the big things is funny. We talk about cheese. I've been allergic to dairy my whole life. About 2 years old, my mom figured out 2, 3 years old that I would have violent reactions to dairy products. And that was tough because, growing up in the 70s and 80s, there were not those, you couldn't go to the corner store and get a vegan ice cream. Like that was not an option. So for me, I've always had the issue my entire life of trying to figure out how to enjoy things while being violently allergic to dairy. Now it's easy in the sense that I could go pick up a coconut yogurt or almond yogurt or almond milk in any metro area. You can find a lot of non-dairy options, but growing up that was tough. But to answer your question in terms of comfort foods or the holidays or things like that, I've learned to get really creative with potatoes. Like if you want to talk, it's so funny. Like I think for me, whenever I think about comfort food, for some reason, oh my God, I crave potatoes, right? Scallop potatoes, mashed potatoes, candied yams, sweet potato pie. Like, I don't know why, but sweet potatoes and regular potatoes, I go crazy. The fall and winter, I eat like my body weight in potatoes, and I just figure out all kinds of creative ways to use potatoes.
All the carb people out there, they're like, I don't eat carbs. They're all like, wait, how do we? Like all the Atkins people, we just lost all of them, and all. So, because even like myself, I'm like, oh great, I've been on a carb diet since I was 15. So again, what can I do?
I mean, I think you also mentioned like not being able to eat soy, right? Two of the highest sources of, I guess, plant-based protein. I mentioned, beans, legumes. You look at chickpeas, black beans, navy beans, adzuki beans. And here's the thing too. Some people are like, yo, I can't eat beans because they give me flatulence. Here's a quick culinary secret to any bean. Like this is the best thing. So there's a seaweed out there called kombu. It's kombu. You can pick this up at an Asian market. They also have it at Whole Foods. Pretty much any natural food or Asian market will have kombu. And what you do is you take one strip. It's kind of like a wide, broad seaweed. And whenever you're cooking beans, what you can do is take a strip of this kombu and you put it in there. And there's actually a brand that already does this. There's a brand called Eden Foods, EDEN, that already cooks their beans with kombu if you want to just get a can and you don't want to cook beans from scratch. So whether you're buying the canned beans from Eden or you're making them from scratch, the kombu seaweed, there's a compound in the seaweed that actually deactivates the flatulence creating capabilities of beans. Like it'll remove the gaseousness, and then legit you eat the beans and they don't make you fart. So that's just a little culinary tip. If anyone's like, beans, they don't feel so good, they make them easier to digest and they remove the gaseous effects. So kombu is the secret to making great beans.
So we're going to change the lyric: beans, beans, good for your heart. Add the kombu and you will not fart.
I'm curious how you feel about the whole bulletproof philosophy. And I mean, I actually, because of that, like I have the high octane oil that I put in my coffee every morning or my tea. And I cook with a ton of butter. Like when I make the boys like eggs, I mean, I'll use like 2 tablespoons of butter. Like, and I just keep thinking like I'm just helping everything run more smoothly in their bodies and filling them with fat. But like, what's your thought on that? I'm curious.
I think again, Bioindividuality, and also, I'm a big fan, Rachel, of blood panel testing. And here's why, right? Is we talk about bioindividuality, depending on your genetics and how your body processes animal fats and cholesterol, as an example, right? So if we look at things like grass-fed butter or ghee, there are benefits to it in the sense that it has the ability, depending on how your body, again, bioindividuality, that it can increase healthy amounts of progesterone in your body, right? Some people are very deficient in progesterone. It is a healthy hormone to have for your body to function. And so we don't want to have super low levels of progesterone. So grass-fed butter and ghee, which is sort of the Ayurvedic Indian version of their clarified butter, helps to elevate levels of progesterone in your body, which is good. You want to have healthy, balanced hormones. So I'm not going to say, butter is 100% bad for you. The thing is, though, if you have, say, heart problems, or you have already elevated levels of cholesterol, butter may not be a good choice. And that's why I wanted to bring up very briefly the concept of blood panel testing. So every few years, I go see my physician here in LA, and he runs what is called a blood panel test, which not only shows me my vitamin levels, my nutrients, my cholesterol, my hormones, my lipoproteins, any biological markers, any genetic function. He looks at, the amount of testosterone, estrogen, progesterone in my body. So I would recommend, if you are curious about what's happening in your body and how you want to optimize, I do this for two reasons. Number one, it's very hard to guesstimate what is happening in your body from a nutrient perspective unless you go and get a blood panel test. It's very hard to say, I might need more B12. We brought that up. I actually might need more progesterone. I might need to lower the amount of cholesterol-laden foods. We don't know that unless we actually go get our blood drawn and our urine tested and see what's actually going on inside our body from a biological perspective. So I'm a huge, huge proponent of, say, every 3 to 5 years, going and getting a blood panel test. So the long answer, Rachel, is like, if you and your boys and your family are good with butter, you feel energized on it, and maybe you want to go get a blood panel test to check your cholesterol, check your lipoprotein levels, and see how it's affecting you. But again, it's an individualized thing. I like Dave Asprey. I know Dave. I've lectured with him at different health conferences, and we agree on more than we disagree on, right? This is a big thing that I want to talk about really quickly about, people are often like, oh, the vegans are wrong and keto's right, or keto's wrong and paleo's right, and no, you should eat a fruitarian diet. Like, there's so many different ways that people say humanity should live. I think, again, it goes back to radical experimentation. You mentioned, Rachel, MCT oil, the high octane oil. I put that in my tonics all the time. I love MCT oil because of the fat burning capability, the fact that it turns our brain on. I feel great when I take MCT oil. And, Dave and I, we agree on, eating whole foods, eating locally grown foods, eating organic foods, mitigating EMFs in our life, not, putting any chemicals in our body. So if I talk to my friends that are into keto or talk to my friends that are into paleo, we agree on a lot more than we disagree on. And I think that's also important to take into account.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to step back and, sorry, Rachel, did you want to add?
No, I like everything that you're saying makes sense to me. And I actually started with a new doctor's practice, and it's a very kind of holistic approach. And she does a whole panel, and then she even did it because I was deficient in B12 as well, and some other things. And she even ran the panel 3 months later to see like how my body was adjusting. And so I think it makes a lot of sense.
I'm glad you did that for yourself, honestly, because it's such a worthy investment in the sense that most people, they'll be like, I'm low on energy. And then they go to, we keep talking about Whole Foods just because it's probably most top of mind. And you go to the supplement section, right? And you have a sales associate that's like, here, take this energy supplement. But you don't actually know what you're specifically deficient in. So you could be spending hundreds or thousands of dollars, not hundreds of, well, maybe some people are spending hundreds of thousands if you're LeBron James, who spends over $1 million a year on his body. Like, as an aside, I'm a huge basketball fan. I was reading about LeBron James and his nutrition protocol, his training protocol. That dude is serious. Like, he spends over $1 million a year on food, nutrition, supplements, body care. I was like, dude, more power to you if you have the means. But what I don't want is people wasting their money in the sense that, I might be, you said B12, right? Rather than going to the doctor and investing a few $100s in a blood panel test, then you know exactly what your body needs. Then you're not going and throwing good money after bad. I say it's kind of trying to hit the bullseye on a dartboard with a blindfold on, right? It could be vitamin C. It could be vitamin D. I don't know what it is. So again, for anyone out there, whether it's you goddesses or the listener who wants to know what's happening, find a good doctor in your doctor in your area and get a full blood panel test so you can see exactly what's going on. I'm so glad you did that, Rachel.
Thank you. And another trick, I was low in iron, and now I cook in a cast iron pan, which feels so much better to do than something that's like coated. But now, like even that, like my iron levels are so much better now after, and I did the iron supplement just for a period of time, again, just to see, but there's like all these little things that you can be doing.
That's awesome.
I love that you say that. We talk a lot about tapping into our inner goddess, and this is like really seeing what works for you and feels right. And to measure that by getting the blood. I did that too and found out years ago that I was low in vitamin D. And that was actually when I had my cancer diagnosis. And I read some studies about that I was telling the girls yesterday that it was somewhat related. And just knowing that and being able to add just a supplement of vitamin D, into my diet was so helpful to me. I'd like to step back though and talk about your journey a little bit more. We know that you had a very successful Food Network show. And I know that it was one season and it wasn't picked up. And when I was reading about it the other day, I found it so interesting because at the time, I believe it was the CEO perhaps, or someone said, well, people want burgers, bacon, and beer. And it's true, but in effect, maybe that was back in 2014, right? I think it might be different now, but I don't know. But I wanted to ask you, when that happened, and I read your blog about it, it seemed like you turned that into a silver lining. And I mean, it was a roadblock and it was hard, but you decided to just embrace it. Can you talk a bit about that? And perhaps if there were any other roadblocks on your journey?
Yeah, that was a hard time in my life. 2014 was I just want to give a little bit of context to that because one of the things that I have been evolving into speaking more about over, say, the last 2 to 3 years has been mental and emotional health. And I actually started a podcast almost a year ago. The podcast is called This Might Get Uncomfortable. And really the foundation of that with my co-host and my best friend Whitney is we talk about all the ins and outs of this often chaotic, confusing, and glorious human experience. And a foundation of what we talk about on the podcast is really mental and emotional wellness, and how challenging and diverse and complex that conversation is. But that was really born, Karen, out of that year 2014, where my series of How to Live to 100 on Food Network and Cooking Channel got canceled. I broke up with my longtime partner at the time. My first book deal fell through, and I was just burnt out. I was burnt out from working past the point of exhaustion for so many years that I actually had a breakdown that year, and I was diagnosed with clinical depression. I was very suicidal that year. I'm just being completely honest. Like 2014 was the hardest year of my life so far. But the silver lining in all that was the resilience of coming to such a dark place in your life that you don't know how you're going to come out of it, like being at the bottom of the well, so to speak, to use a metaphor, and then finding the strength within yourself to climb out of your own well or your own personal hell. That was a tough year. That was really, really hard for a lot of reasons. But it was also a blessing, right? Because I was on this interesting track of, having these managers and having agents and having PR people and doing these big tours around the TV series. And, there was all this talk about having my own line of, cookware and spices and knives. And there's kind of this formula, and Camille, you talked about the entertainment industry earlier. There's kind of these formulas sometimes in the entertainment industry where they're like, okay, we have this celebrity chef formula. And it's like this. We're gonna get you on covers of magazines. We're gonna get you a TV show. We're gonna get you a PR person and then an agent and a manager, and we're gonna get you a book deal, and we're gonna get you all these product lines, like Emerald and Guy Fieri and Rachel Ray. There's a formula that is put in place, so to speak, where you build a career and you build a brand. Where we have celebrity everything right now. We have celebrity chefs. We have celebrity real estate agents. We have celebrity repo people. I'm still waiting for celebrity garbage people, like celebrity garbage men. Real Housewives of Garbage Men. It's crazy to me how we've celebritized everything in our culture now.
Yeah.
Like, we're so obsessed with celebrity. But the blessing was that I think that I was making a lot of creative compromises along the way because I was so hungry for it. I was like, oh, I'm going to be the next, I'm going to be whatever, the next Anthony Bourdain. I'm going to be the next Alton Brown. I'm going to be the next Guy Fieri. Like, I was being groomed in that mold along the way. But to be honest, I was giving up a lot of my creative instincts and a lot of the things I really wanted to do for the idea of being famous. So the silver lining was not only the recovery from that clinical depression and the dark place I was in emotionally and mentally, but it was seeing that I was being molded and allowing myself to be taken by, like I said, managers, agents, Food Network. And I was subtly and almost undetectably, until I realized it, giving up part of my creative instinct, my creative vision, to have this carrot that they dangle, right? Because when they're like, we're going to make you all this money, we're going to make you so famous, and then the show gets canceled. And then once the show gets canceled, everyone's like, well, we actually, you know what, we're going to pull that deal. We're going to pull that deal. Like, a lot came crashing down in my life after that show got pulled. But if I look at it, I may have ended up in a spot where I was not really happy with the outcome because, it's not that money's not great, fame's not great, but if we sacrifice who we are in the process, I think that has the propensity to be a very lonely place to be when you're surrounded by wealth and money and fame and you've lost a part of who you are. And I think I was headed down that track, to be honest with you.
Well, and I also just find it, when you introduced yourself, you talked about how you are evolving and you have interests, and that you don't necessarily want to have to stay on a single path. And, it's just interesting because it's so painful hearing that story and hearing, what you went through. And it's a beautiful end, but the way where you started in describing who you are and that path was not the same.
Yeah, because it really is, this idea that you eat and sleep and breathe it and be it, where if you want to, I don't know, I suppose reach that level of, like I said, Anthony Bourdain, Guy Fieri, these famous chefs that we know, having met some of them and seen how their lives, it's an all-consuming thing. It really consumes. And so in that sense, you better really be in love with it, and some of them are really like, this is my passion. I eat this, I breathe this, I live this. This is all I want to do. But if I'm really honest about it, it wasn't an all-consuming thing for me. I thought it was for a while. Like, this is exactly, like, I found my thing. This is my one thing. This is the thing I'm going to do the rest of my life. But it wasn't necessarily so. Life had shown me, like, actually, no, this isn't what you're going to do the rest of your life. And so I go back to, I guess, the beginning of this conversation about surrender and listening and realizing that, I guess maybe from a Zen perspective, almost like a Buddhist perspective. I'm not a Buddhist, but I appreciate a lot of elements of Zen Buddhism. That uncertainty and change and not really knowing what's going to happen next are constants of life. We try and assume control. We try and think we know what's going to happen. I mean, I had no idea how this conversation with all of you was going to flow today. I mean, we had questions, but to end up where we're at now in this conversation, we couldn't have anticipated it. Much like later today, we really have no idea what our day is going. We don't know what's going to happen 5 minutes from now. And so I guess these perceived failures or these perceived losses in my life that were so painful, they've been good teachers. They've been good teachers in the sense of, like, let go of your expectations, let go of thinking what's going to happen, and surrender to the constant change and evolution of life. And I still struggle with that sometimes. I still want to control things. I still want certainty. But life keeps showing me, dude, you have very little control, maybe none at all. Who knows, depending on what your philosophy is. And you don't know what's going to happen next. So just keep surrendering and keep letting go. It's a hard lesson, but I keep learning it. And it's ultimately a good lesson.
Okay, I'm just dumbfounded you're showing your vulnerability like this. I didn't know that about you until I read that, but I'm thinking back to our conversations where I would, what's not as it's a totally different comparison, but I would just be feeling down. And I remember when I had, won't get into specifics, but it was dealing with me kind of feeling with this podcast that I had to deal with all these outside production type things. And I was like, it's getting off of my vision, right? And you were like, just surrender to it, perhaps have someone else do that part for you. That's not really what you're interested in and what you're passionate in, but stick to what you're feeling in your core. And you've taken everything that you've learned in your life, like with that experience in 2014, and you are using it to help others, especially when you're coaching me. So I appreciate, again, your vulnerability and sharing that story. I know it will help so many people who are listening. And just to understand that they are lessons. It sucks when you go through all that. It's shitty. It's horrible, especially now with the pandemic and everything that we're going through in 2020. But to take a deep breath and to look back and see what we can learn from it.
Yeah, I think it's so
appreciate
wonderful.
you sharing.
Yeah. And you know, also Karen too, like I know this might sound, I don't know, rote or cliche, but there are so many days when I feel down for a variety of reasons, you know, financial struggles, emotional struggles. I mean, we are all fighting silent battles that we might not talk about publicly. You know, I don't, there's not a single person I know in my life that isn't struggling or having some kind of challenge with the chaos and uncertainty that it seems to be swirling all around us in this world right now. But there are times when I literally will just stand in the shower and I'm just like, thank God I have clean water to bathe in. Thank God I have food in my fridge. Thank God I have a roof over my head where I know people are getting evicted left and right in the city. And I know it might sound cliche, but I practice that so often now, especially these days, a gratitude practice of the simplest things. Thank you for food. Thank you for clean water to bathe in and drink every day. I said this prayer last night. Thank you for a bed. Thank you for a roof over my head. Thank you for my animal companions. Thank you for my family being healthy. Thank you for me being healthy. My friends being here for me. I mean, these simple things, I think this pandemic this year has just reinforced to me, man, just like take inventory and thank God for the small things, because they are not small things. They mean, like, those things mean everything, you know, and anything on top of that to me is like, it's gravy. But those simple gratitude prayers have helped keep me sane. They keep keeping me sane.
Well, we want to thank you for joining us today and sharing your plant-based knowledge, your vulnerabilities of what you've been through, all the charities that you're involved with. If our listeners and viewers want to contact you for all the various hats that you have, how can they do that?
Yeah. So first of all, I'm putting a lot of energy, as I mentioned, into my podcast. This might get uncomfortable, so people can email me there. It's on all the social media handles. It's our brand is called Wellevator. I'll spell it. It's at WELLEVATR.com, at Wellevator, on all the social media handles, or people can go to wellevator.com. If they want to go to my personal website, it's jasonwrobel.com, and my last name is spelled WROB as in boy, EL.com. I have a great YouTube channel, like I mentioned, with a bunch of recipes and health videos. So I am easily stalkable online. Easily findable? Stalkable? Is that creepy? Stalkable might be creepy.
That's okay.
I'm easily discoverable.
Well, thank you so much, Jason, for joining us today on Grateful Goddesses.
It's my pleasure. Thanks so much.
We're grateful to you. Thank you. So here's where I want to ask all the ladies if they have any questions that they didn't have answered that we can edit in. Go ahead, Rachel.
No, it's not even another question. It was just a comment that in addition to that, the gratitude, like the regular gratitude. And again, like I am just during this whole crazy of like getting a COVID test for different things. And I'm like, I'm so grateful that even if I have to pay for a COVID test and I can't get it for free or whatever, it's not convenient, like I can afford the test. But I've also had like this running list of like silver linings of Corona. And just like every time I think about something, I'm like, God, remember this silver lining, because there's so many disappointments and losses happening that like you have to remember the silver linings. You have to.
Well, and it's also remembering too, I think, that everything is temporary. Everything. I had a buddy of mine who he was just like, broke and done, and like, I got to leave LA. Like one of those things where you're so broke, you have to, like, I gotta move back home. Like I have nothing. He moved back to the East Coast. And now, we're in October. We're still obviously in the pandemic and the economic, whatever the hell is going on, recession, depression. And he's like, dude, I just got this amazing high paying job. He's back home in Boston. He was suffering for so long with being, completely broke, right? Having to leave LA after so many years. And now he's got this amazing job. He loves it. They love him. He's getting paid well. He's bounced back. So to your point, I think what I try and remind myself is that it's, the wins are temporary, right? And those moments of celebration and joy are temporary, but so is the sorrow and the loss and the pain. Like it's all temporary, all of it, right? And I'm glad you said that, because it's a good reminder. It's all just, okay, this too shall pass. The good and all of it, this too shall pass.
I want to just add there, when you were at your deepest place, and if our viewers and listeners are feeling that, did you contact any type of hotline? I can look people can just look it up, but is there something or somewhere that people can reach out, people can reach out to, do you think?
Yeah. To be blunt, I didn't call one of the national suicide hotlines. But I actually, boy, yeah, this is, it's interesting to reflect back on it, because I was actually like planning out how I wanted to kill myself. Like I got to that level of not just thinking about it, but actually like planning it. I didn't make an attempt, but there was a moment in the kitchen where I was like, am I actually going to do this? Like I was preparing to do it. And that was my breaking point, was like, if you're actually like, you're sitting there and you're almost going to do it, you need to get help. Like that was the moment where I knew I needed to get help, where it was beyond just thinking about it. It was me like preparing to do it. And instead of calling a hotline, I actually, I called a mentor of mine who's an older male mentor, who's more like a father to me than my father was. He's really like my dad. His name is Michael, and he's been a mentor of mine for many, many years. And I said, Michael, I almost killed myself, and I'm in a bad place. He recommended a therapist. So I immediately went to go seek a therapist. And I know that option is not, I'm very I was in a privileged position to be able to afford that, right? I know not everyone can afford to go physically see a therapist. But there are some apps I know online where they will connect you with an online therapist where the rates are more affordable, which didn't exist back in 2014. So whether someone needs to call a hotline, or maybe they can take advantage of some of these apps to find an online therapist, I know some of those are more affordable options, or even free options. But I immediately sought out therapy. That was the first time I ever got my blood panels tested, and found out that I actually got a neurotransmitter test back then, and I got all my brain chemicals tested. I was low in dopamine, I was low in serotonin, I was low in epinephrine, I was low in 5-HTP, and I remember my doctor said, well, it's dude, he didn't say dude, that's me. It's no wonder you're clinically depressed, because if you look at your neurotransmitter levels, they're all suboptimal. It's no wonder you want to kill yourself. So from a chemical perspective, because I was so stressed, because I wasn't eating well, I was shooting the TV series, here I am, talking about health and wellness, and I'm neglecting my health and wellness. So that was a massive wake-up call. But for me, Karen, it was seeking out psychotherapy, and it was going to get my blood panels tested and work on healing my brain. I had to heal my brain chemicals.
Up next, favorite things. Opening up to happiness and joy.
Welcome, everyone, to Favorite Things with our guest, Jason Wrobel. And we are going to talk about our favorite things that bring us happiness, joy, are yummy, just make us feel happy, because we know that the more that we focus on those things, the more we will attract into our life. So I would like to start with a delicious buttery spread. It is not butter. Jason, you may know this. It's called milkademia. Are you familiar with this?
Oh yeah, that is, That's like, oh my God, bada bing, bada boom.
It's so
that is
good.
the best tagline. That's the best tagline, by the way. And their
Oh, yeah.
milk, their macadamia milk.
Yes.
Oh my God, it's so creamy and so rich and so frothy.
That was in my latte this morning, but I was able to sneak this upstairs. I'm sure my husband is like going crazy trying to find it to put it in on his vegan eggs. But we love this. And Rachel, if you're looking for a butter substitute, it's so good. It's so tasty and it's clean. You know, it's macadamia oil blend. It's just really yummy. So that's what I wanted to share. And Camille, you're up.
Okay, so I'm sharing something because my father being pescatarian, for Father's Day one year, I wanted to make him breakfast in bed. So I made him this really fancy omelet, and probably was like 12, 13, not a cook at all, mind you, and just went in the fridge and just grabbed all the vegetables I could and just threw them into the omelet, and he ate all of it, which is a sign that he really loves me. But it just, as an adult, once I realized how bad of an omelet it was, it just made me really appreciate how much you must really love me to have eaten all of it. Just so here's what it is.
That's a picture.
Those are cucumbers, tomatoes, carrots, radishes. None of them pre-cooked. Like I didn't cook them first and throw it in. Like I just diced them up and threw them in there. Like, yay, vegetarian omelet. It was horrible, and I feel really bad. And I'm glad he survived. And I love you very much.
You took a picture of it. I love it.
Polaroid. It was a Polaroid just to show how old it is.
Legit.
But, I try to, like, it didn't look right on my computer. And
no, that's great. Thank you for sharing. You'll have to, maybe you'll write a cookbook.
No, nobody wants my cookbooks. I've had a fire boiling water during the pandemic. So,
okay. Well, you'll have to get Jason's cookbook. Dina.
Okay. So I don't even know how much of this I'm eating. It's called Slim Kim popcorn. And it's all, gluten-free, non-GMO, heart healthy, no trans fats, peanut-free, popped in coconut oil. It was at Mariano's. They had a huge vast of it. I think it's not there anymore, so I had to order it online, and it's local. It's from it's women-owned company in the North Burbs, and I just highly recommend trying it, you guys. It's so good if you love popcorn. My favorite.
Slim Kim, love that. Want to try that?
Slim Kim is, but...
So, Jason, what's your favorite thing?
Okay, so I was recently, I've worked with these guys. They're one of my favorite brands out there, but they sent me something super cool recently that I totally love. There's a brand out there called Elmhurst, and Elmhurst has a really super unique story in that they're the oldest they're still around in business, oldest running dairy producer in New York State. I think they've been around since the early 1900s. A few years ago, they transitioned from cow dairy, to being a fully plant-based manufacturer. It's the only company in the world I know of it, right? And this is a massive brand. Talk about a risk, right? Like everyone knew Elmhurst for their cow's milk, and then they completely flipped. 100% their entire product portfolio into plant-based milks now. They recently came out with, and I don't know any other brand that's doing this, a homemade soft serve ice cream mix. Soft serve, not like scoop, not like, you get your pint and you sit on the couch and you watch your favorite Netflix show and you're doing your thing. Speaking from experience, soft serve, right? So I was like, how are they going to pull off this soft serve? So they send it to you. It's actually in the fridge. I could probably go grab it and show for the video, maybe by the end of the podcast.
Okay. Yeah.
You want me to go grab it now? I could go grab it now. Okay.
Sure.
Let me run and
grab
it.
Bring Bella back.
Okay. The Frenchie is here on request.
Okay,
say hi, honey.
Hi, Bella.
Say hi, honey.
oh, so cute.
I know. We all have to have a Bella in our lives.
We do. She's such a sweet, sweet being. And she wants the soft serve now. Okay, so dig this, showing it on camera. So the Elmhurst soft serve mix comes in vanilla or chocolate. Cool. And what you do is, it's so easy. You chill this in the fridge, and then you can pour it, if you have an ice cream machine, which not a lot of people I know have an ice cream machine, or you can get this really inexpensive Zoku bowl. It's a Zoku. It's called a Zoku bowl. And you put this in the freezer. And all you got to do is take the soft serve mix and you pour it in the Zoku bowl and you whip it. And it makes instant soft serve ice cream. And it is bomb. It's unbelievable. So anybody out there who has a dairy allergy, even if you don't have a dairy allergy, it's creamy, it's thick, it's got that like soft, it's like soft serve ice cream. It's crazy how good this is. So
and can you order it online?
You can order it online. So this comes room temperature, and they send you a pack of them. And then they also have on the Elmhurst website where you can buy a gift pack with the frozen Zoku bowl. And then all you got to do is, like I said, pop the ice cream mix in the fridge and the Zoku bowl in the freezer. And then you just literally whip it up in the bowl and it's done. It's the easiest thing ever.
I'm so excited because that's another item that's so hard to find, is a really good tasting soft serve ice cream.
Totally. And when you make it home, it's like, whoa, this is next level.
Love it. Thank you. And thank you for showing Bella. Okay, Rachel, you requested to be last. I'm so curious what your favorite thing is today.
So my favorite thing is the blouse that I am wearing. And I don't think it's like hard to see. It's this rubbed poly chiffon material. It's a vintage blouse. It's from the 70s. And I was texting with the owner of the vintage store to I forget the background of the blouse, but it's hard to tell like on Zoom and the coloring, but it's like this bright pink color, which I always think of as like my power color. And it just brings me joy. And I love like the whole repurposing, and it's from a collection of a woman that I like really relate to. I've actually bought a lot of her clothes, and I don't know, it happens to be like an Indian summer outside.
Happens to be warm outside today.
It's a beautiful day in Chicago, and
what's the name of the designer, or did you say it already? What's the name of the, you're trying to find it. Okay. We'll put it on the website.
No, I don't even know if it's a designer blouse. It's just a blouse from the 70s. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, that kind of goes along with my Grateful Goddess vintage bubble letter t-shirt and my roots to Grateful Goddesses like 11 years ago. And my coach, Jason Wrobel, who I highly recommend, please reach out to him for anything coach related. I mean, he's just got so many hats, and he is just truly a grateful goddess of all kinds. So thank you so much for joining us today, everybody, on Grateful Goddesses.
Unleashed your inner goddess yet? Thanks for joining us today on Grateful Goddesses. We invite you to visit our website, www.gratefulgoddesses.com, to access today's show notes as well as other helpful resources. Don't forget to leave a review. Until next time, stay strong and empowered to be a grateful goddess.